Hi, everyone. My name is Shania Siren. I'm one of the Career and Fellowship Advisors for the Center for Life Beyond Read. Today, we're going to do a Q&A session with our two Goldwater recipients.
I'm Simon. I see him. I'm class of 21 studying math and statistics. I applied to the Goldwater my sophomore and junior year and won the Goldwater my junior year. So that was 2020.
And I'm Patrick. I'm a physics student in the class of 2022. I only applied for the Goldwater in my junior year. So I applied in January of 2021, and I was selected as a 2021 scholar.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me today to talk a little bit about your experience applying for the Goldwater. I'm going to hop right into questioning and just battering you both with questions. It's going to be a very aggressive process. You're going to be very stressed by the end of it. So my first question for you, off the top of your head, how many hours per week do you think you spent drafting first your internal application that you submitted to the Fellowships and Awards Committee? Then once you were nominated, can you give me an idea of how much time you spent working on that external application that you submitted to Goldwater?
So I guess I'll preface this by saying like it's been a good while, and so I take my advice with a grain of salt here. So from my memory, I think the amount of time that I spent on the internal application and the external application were like closer to each other than I would have anticipated. Like the revision process was really like there was a lot that changed, and I ended up feeling a lot more confident about my application after that revision both times around. I would say that that actual number was something like 4 to 6 hours a week, and it was just a couple weeks for both of those times.
For me, I remember thinking that I wanted to apply for the Goldwater because I had a lot of research experiences, but I was pretty confident that I wouldn't get selected, so I didn't spend too much time on my initial application as much. I only spent, Simon said 4 to 6 hours a week. I think I spent like 4 to 6 hours total on my first application. And then when I was nominated, that's when I exponentially increased the amount of time that I spent writing it, especially because for the external application, you got to include a research paper in this ugly Arial 12-point font. So that took me at least 20 hours to perfect, 20 to 30 hours, I think, just in rewrite. I rewrote a lot of my application, including all the little essays that you submit for the internal application, which are the same prompts for the external. But I rewrote a lot, and then I also spent a lot of time coming up with a research paper that I shared with professors and some of my peers.
So it's safe to say then that like the external process is really when you kick it into gear and you have to make sure to like commit some time in your schedule to perfecting that application and anticipating that you're going to have to write a research paper. Surprise. The internal application is generally less intensive. The essays are shorter. There's just less content that we want you to submit. And then the Goldwater is especially one of those awards where we're like, great, you're nominated. Now you get to write so much more stuff. So much more content has to be drafted for your final. So I think it's important for people to know that like, the internal may not be a huge time commitment, but if you do get nominated, yay, now you need to block some time off on your calendar.
And I like it kind of comes together naturally, like that like sense of how much time you should be spending on it, because Reed has like a few processes leading up to the external deadline for like reviewing thoroughly. So you'll be like meeting with folks, and I think that kind of set the tone for like understanding how much effort you can do.
Yeah, sorry. I'm on mute. Well, I guess this kind of leads into what you were talking about, Patrick, in terms of like, what was the process for both of you in coming up with what you were going to write about in this research paper.
Okay, I can start talking about this one. So a little bit of a background on my experiences. So for the Goldwater, you need to submit a GPA and your research experiences. But unlike a lot of other applicants, I didn't really have a lot of formal research experience. So all of the research I've done was all like done by myself. So I was thinking of submitting one of my research stuff to an American Nuclear Society conference in January. And that was based off of some of the research work that I had done during the fall at the reactor. So while I was writing the paper, the conference paper, I adapted a version of that for my Goldwater research paper. But I think writing the Goldwater research paper was a lot harder than the actual conference paper, because some of the nuclear work that I did was very niche. It's like computational neutronics. And most people have no idea what that means. I barely have an understanding of what that really means. So having to rewrite a solid research project and then boil it down so that any scientist could possibly read it. Like, I'm sure, like, if you apply, you select your field, and I'm sure there's subject matter experts, but you can only really guarantee that they may be physicists, but not necessarily nuclear or astrophysicists, etc. So, so having to write it in a very clear way in 12-point font in 3 pages was definitely challenging in making sure you could get your entire motivation, your process, your data, your conclusions, your impacts across in that short amount of space. So efficiency was pretty hard. Yeah, how about you, Simon?
Good thing. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you say. The process for me in terms of like choosing what to write about. So heading into applying both times around, I had just had one kind of like proper research experience, and the sense that I got from talking to folks who had applied in the liaison for the award at the time was that your research paper ought to be something that like you feel comfortable talking about in your kind of proposal for what's next in that research project can be like very measured and exact and like small. Like, this is an incremental improvement on a thing I've already done that I know how to talk about because I've done it. Which it's absolutely not a requirement to have like formal research experience to apply. But that sort of like made my choice of what to write about chosen for me, which I think made it a bit more straightforward. And then absolutely there's the challenge of like deciding how much background to give and figure out exactly how to write to your audience. So one of the things that was really helpful for me, and I think we're going to get a little bit to this later, but so I was applying in computational statistics, and sort of the guarantee you get, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're told that like somebody, at least for me, generally from math, would be the person that would be reading mine. And so as early on in the process as I could, I tried to like have a pure math professor like give this a read and see what their first thoughts on it were. And I think that's something I recommend giving a go.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. You can, I don't know how much of a guarantee it is, but the Goldwater tries its best to align folks who are reviewing your application with, you know, at least generally the area of study. So yeah, I think that is a really good strategy. And I think, yeah, you're right. This kind of feeds into the next question. So who all did you work with or talk to or get feedback from when drafting your application? And I think this question is useful just because I think it's good for students to hear just like how wide your community can be when you're applying to fellowships, that you don't have to operate within a silo when applying for these awards, and that you shouldn't.
For me, like you said, Shania, I realized that this would probably be read by a physicist, So I shared it with my physics professors because most of my research work was done at our reactor. And sometimes, when you go into a field, it can get pretty niche. So I wanted to be sure that whatever I wrote, even if it was nuclear physics, was easily understandable by any physicist, right? And in our physics department, we have Allison that does astrophysics, we have Joel that does computational physics, Daryl with quantum and solid state physics. So I asked all those professors to read over my research paper to make sure that it was really understandable. And really, I can't emphasize this enough, making sure that your paper in just 3 pages and big 12-point font is was able to convey a full message in that limited space. And I actually asked Simon for some of his materials, and I think I really benefited from that, because one thing that I liked from Simon's paper, if I I might be misremembering this, but I think Simon measured the different computational methods or different statistical methods, and he showed that his method was more efficient than other existing ones. And I forget the exact details of the research, but what I took away from that was that Simon really portrayed his impacts well. That he didn't get lost in the weeds of the individual processes, but I liked how clearly he showed why his work mattered. So I tried to emulate that in my paper by specifically talking about the impact of this work, and it's only 2 data points, but I think it's worked out for the both of us.
I like this advice. We got to keep this ball rolling and just, make sure to holler at Patrick, whoever is applying next year. Yeah, for me, thinking through exactly who it was, I'm sure will be a bit of revisionist history, because it's been a good bit. But I would say definitely somebody I talked to was Shania and folks at CLBR generally. And especially leading up to that first deadline, the internal deadline. I would also totally have writing tutors, like peer writing tutors at Reed, give a pass at it if you can make time. I know that I asked my research advisor, so somebody that was squarely an expert in the thing that I was writing about. And so professors, from people who specialize in exactly what you're writing in, to as general or lenient of an interpretation of what your field is as you can think of. So for me, it was anybody that was doing kind of quantitative research. I was what do you think of this? Does this make sense to you? And then also, I can't remember the word that they use from it, the representative or something like that, whoever it is.
The campus representative.
Yeah, okay. So definitely, I think it's kind of built in, that part of the process, where they have you meet with them a couple of times to really kind of shape up your story, general story.
Yeah, I definitely remember meeting with Eric a couple times over winter break too. And he was our faculty liaison, I think. And he definitely gave some feedback on my materials.
All right, so let's see. So my fourth question for the both of you is, what were some of the greatest challenges of competing for this award? And some good examples are just time management, having to conceptualize your research essay, whatever it was. What did you find was a challenge in the process for applying to this award?
You want to go first, Patrick?
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely fresh in my mind. I remember being so self-conscious about applying for the award, because I had about a 3.3 when I applied, and I think that's got to be one of the historic lowest GPAs for a Goldwater scholar. Because I understand that Reed does tend to have lower GPAs than many of its peer schools, but many of our fellow Goldwater scholars from other schools did end up having around 3.9s plus. So I was pretty self-conscious of that. I was also a bit self-conscious about or meeting with the other Goldwater nominees, because there were all such strong candidates that in my year we had Andy Zhao from biology, we had Peter Nguyen from math and stats, I think, and Amelia Schaefer from physics and chemistry. That were all such strong applicants, and they all had research experiences. So maybe we'll also talk about this a bit later, but I would encourage everyone to be a lot more confident in applying, because I feel like part of the Goldwater Scholarship was being confident in that your research work is solid and that it matters, and that they should be funding you $7,500 per year until you graduate, because that's how confident you are in your research work. So that was a pretty big challenge for me in just personally asserting myself on a national scholarship like that.
I would totally echo that. The self-consciousness was like definitely a big challenge there. Another thing that, like, hopefully a video like this and being able to like pass around our sample essays among each other will help with, was like getting a sense for what the expectation is, like just based on the questions they're giving you. Like, here's like a 10-word question and you have such and such amount of characters to answer it. I think sometimes it felt like there was like a lot of directions you could go with stuff. And so like hopefully having some history here, and it sounds like as the years go by, we're like cohorting a bit more closely and working with each other when we're putting together essays. I think that will be like really helpful. And then the other thing, I remember working with the Goldwater rep at Reed like really closely to try to craft like the story, like what are the linkages among the projects that I might have spent time with that like could speak to how I got here. And I think it's very easy to just be like, well, I did one thing and then I did another thing, and they both just seem cool. But Sam Fei was very helpful in kind of pointing out the linkages between those things and kind of trying to articulate how where you're at can speak to like where you've been and where you're going.
Yeah, Simon really brought up a good point. That's definitely something I thought about in my application too, where you have these, it's like the common application when you apply for colleges. You have like these slots to talk about each of your research experiences. You have like 5 slots or something like that. And then I really did put some amount of effort into making sure that, you know, when I talked about, you know, like UCI or something, which was one of my first internship opportunities, I made sure that I didn't just mention UCI in that like one section, right? I made sure to reference it in different parts of my application, such that it really showed up as a story. And probably because whoever's reading your application may not necessarily have the best memory of your experiences, like they might not have the best short-term memory. So it's just also nice to keep mentioning your opportunities or your experiences, so that, you know, you emphasize the story, and then they start to recognize each of the institutions where you worked and developed at.
I think that is so wonderful, the way you both hit on something that I think in my fellowship advising, I feel like I'm harping on people, is to just how you build your narrative. And it's challenging if no one's ever asked you to do it. But you're right, Patrick, in that it helps people remember it if you can put it into a story. If you can give it some context and some substance about, you know, not that you just did this research experience, but like, you know, why you did it and how it connects to the next thing you did. I think those are great examples. So my next question, kind of on the flip side of that, what of your skills do you think really helped make you a strong applicant / nominee, and then later helped you get awarded?
I'm going to defer to our elder Goldwater scholar, in trying to evaluate which skills were beneficial.
This is your opportunity to gloat. I demand you gloat.
I think like the first thing that this makes me think of, I think there's like an actual like list out your skills section of the Goldwater, which was like a really tricky thing to do. And there's maybe like 5 or 10 slots or something like that. And you just have a little bit of text to explain like what it is you mean by being skillful at something. And so I think I'll take this a bit more literally than maybe you meant it, but like relevant to that skills section, I think my first year, kind of like arising from that self-consciousness that Patrick and I both talked about, I was very like technical with it. Like I was like, I know this programming language and like this mathematical technique or whatever. And of course it's one data point, so who knows whether or not this was it, but I didn't get it my sophomore year. And that second time around, and I think this gets at what both of y'all were talking about with like making a person of yourself on a page, which is a very difficult thing to do. I like leaned a lot more heavily on like what parts of like myself as a person, like do I want this person to like hopefully have a glimpse at through reading my application. And so like those personal elements, like emphasis on mentorship and leadership and stuff like that, I think were helpful to focus in on. What of my skills made me a strong applicant? I mean, it's a tough question to answer generally, like specifically. I think, you know, like having a bit of research experience was really helpful in that, like, there was something that I could lean on pretty immediately to like talk about and kind of draw from in both writing my research essay and situating, like, I think there's like also some sort of other one. Maybe I'm mixing this up with a different application. I think I'm going to defer to Patrick for a bit and see if I can think of anything else.
You did mention, Simon, something that I also think though is really important, of like, you know, the focus of the award obviously is on like STEM research. That's what they want, which is great. When an award has a very specific focus, I know what they want. I can shovel students to them. But you mentioned mentorship and leadership, which I think that is like a subcategory of the Goldwater, is like they're looking for future leaders in STEM. And so not just that you have that experience, but that you also see yourself as a leader and a mentor and somebody who's going to contribute to the field. And so really speaking to not just like the award itself, but like the driving mission of the award, and getting it like a deeper level, looking for that deeper level meaning and how you can really show up in your application. Because it's not just that they want people with the experience, but that like they want people to do something meaningful with it. And again, like that's another thing that I think is challenging in fellowships, to know, to go read the mission statement and really think about how you can connect to that. It's not something that it's not something like the application directions are telling you to go do.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with Shania just said. And I was going to mention a bit about that too, because I kind of realized that the Goldwater, one of the sort of, it's not a prerequisite exactly, but it's almost a prerequisite that you need to be interested in a doctoral program or some kind of terminal PhD degree that's focused on research. So I kind of figured, and I kind of looked at it from a more pragmatic view of what did I really want in a student. So I was thinking to myself, so this is basically a grant where I need to convince them that they need to support me from $7,000 to $15,000 for the next 1 or 2 years, and that I'll be a successful doctoral candidate one day. So what was I going to say with that? So that kind of helped underline how I was phrasing my story. But on the contrary of what Simon said a bit, I thought it was helpful to quantify my efforts a bit more. So I spent a lot of time working at the reactor, and I could have said something along those lines of, oh, I spent so much time at the reactor. But I think it also meant something to add up my hours and just quantify that I spent over the last year, that I spent 400 to 600 hours at the reactor, helping trainees, giving lectures, doing personal experiments that can't always be fully documented on like a resume or in bullet points. And that, with those hundreds of hours of experience, I was able to do my own research and produce 2 papers for the American Nuclear Society. So I think it would be helpful to not only tell your story, but have at least one section where you just directly quantify your efforts. Because I think I tried to think of it very like conservatively, that, oh, this person probably won't remember too much of my application, that they really want the juiciest details. So I thought it was helpful to quantify my efforts, but maybe that helped, maybe that didn't. Who knows? But um, another skill that I thought was helpful to me was realizing that the Goldwater didn't necessarily go to like the best researchers in the country per se. Because when you look at the award winners, it's not, like 20 kids from Stanford and 50 kids from the Ivy Leagues. They select winners from all around the country, with at least like 5 to 10 universities from each state. So I think it was very encouraging, at least just like a mental strength, I guess. It just helped mentally to know that the Goldwater is just looking for students that really tried the best in the environment that they had, right? Not necessarily, producing nature articles every 3 months or something like that, because that's definitely a lot harder to do at Reed versus somewhere like Columbia or MIT. So just knowing that my best efforts here at Reed was just as competitive as other environments was pretty helpful to me. And I think doing my own research was definitely unique compared to many other students.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, you're being able to demonstrate that you are working those many hours at the reactor while taking like a full-time course load, a full-time like research-based course load. Like, I think that's really helpful for folks to see that like you're finding ways to continue to be involved in your research interests outside of the classroom, and you're getting creative in how you're doing that because it's that important to you. And I think you both are really great examples of people who do that. And like, I think that really sends home the message that like, this truly is a career interest for me because I'm doing it in my free time.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, thank you, Shania.
Oh, of course.
There's a good point there. Like, you may or may not have research experience. You may just have one, sort of formal research experience. Maybe like one of the things that was helpful from my perspective was like, even if there's not like a very quantifiable or like immediately identifiable research experience, adjacent experiences like internships or volunteering, or like mentorship at your institution, you should absolutely like mention that stuff and tie it to like what it means for you as a scientist.
Yeah, piggybacking off what Simon said, I suspect that when I'm not sure the total number of people that apply to the National Goldwater Committee. If there's 400 selected a year, I'm guessing there's at least 1,000 applicants from these universities, and I'm sure that they've seen everything and anything that undergrads can do in their decades plus of reviewing these applications, right? There's probably some undergrad that did machining work in a garage, and then everything to publishing Nature articles or APS articles. So like what Simon said, I think it's definitely worthwhile to mention any experiences that were really worthwhile to you, and just to emphasize like the quality over the quantity necessarily. Yeah, so it's the quality of a lot of these efforts that matter, I think, and that whether or not you can clearly demonstrate your impacts even in smaller scale activities. And just to show that you really tried the best in your environment, right? Because I'm sure that if you're in Idaho or even Oregon, the research opportunities will be different versus being in California or Massachusetts. So I think quality and doing the best in your environment really mattered.
Absolutely. You both just hit the nail right on the head. My last and final question for you. What advice would you give to any, I guess in this case, rising sophomores and juniors who may be considering the award?
My advice would be to just apply. If research really mattered a lot, or if you did research, or if you enjoy research, I think you should apply. Because at the end of the day, kind of like what Simon and I mentioned earlier, and Shania mentioned it, Shania actually brought this up, that it's worthwhile to try to understand the underlying goal of the Goldwater Committee, and that they're just not robotically selecting kids with like, it's not like a magical formula of like the highest GPA and the most publications that gets the award. They're really trying to suss out, who's actually going to commit to this PhD route. So if you enjoy research, I think that's already a big plus. And if you can show how passionate or committed you are to research, then that can offset, lower GPAs, or not the most, or maybe you don't have the most research experiences.
I think like the crux of what my recommendation would be the same, like go for it. I did not think I was going to win it. I like considered not applying both times. And I'm glad I did, especially the second time around. And I would also say, like, once Reed is giving you the thumbs up, I think there's like 4 people they can ultimately select or nominate to apply to the award. Like, reach out like crazy. Like, anybody that'll put your eyes on your essay who you think might have a unique perspective, and I may or may not have a unique perspective, but please include me in that list. Feel free to give me a holler. And I think there's a lot of people at Reed that would be willing to give your writing a look.
Yeah, definitely. I also was considering not applying. I really like canceled myself from applying, because I thought to myself that there's no way I meet any of these GPA requirements or these formal research expectations. But I'm glad it worked out, and I think it was definitely because I was able to get the right help at Reed, getting professors or Eric or CLBR to review my materials, and just have confidence in me that I'll be a worthwhile applicant. So just do it. Is that trademarked?
Maybe we have to say it with a question mark. Just do it, and then we're
yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. This was such a great interview. I feel like it's so meaningful for students to support other students in this award process, because I, of course, am available to mildly harass students into applying to awards, but you both gave so much context to the nuances of just what the experience was like, which is something I can't do for folks. So I really appreciate your time.
It was great to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you too, Shania, for arranging this.